Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that discusses our writing journey to make your writing journey easier to navigate. I'm Chris Ryan. I'm a hybrid author. I've done independent, I've done traditional, everything from journalism to fiction to upcoming poetry. Now, that guy over there, he's going to be central to this episode because that guy over there, that's the legendary Alex Simmons. And he has written his own fantastic character, Blackjack, and he has written nonfiction and fiction, and he's taught, just like I've taught, how to write and all of that. But for the interests of this episode today, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Simmons has written 10 different iconic characters. And we're going to talk about what it's like. What are the similarities and differences? What are the varying challenges depending on which character you're writing? But what are the challenges of writing iconic characters? Now, you know, in your heart of hearts, you have dreams of characters that you would love to write. For me, Kolchak the Night Stalker is one of the top ones. Maybe Hawkeye the Archer is the other, right? But Alex Simmons has done it. There's a couple that I'll be able to jump on, one or two. But so we're going to hear what it's like, what are the challenges, what's a character Bible, stuff like that. So let's say hello to this guy. You know, you might have seen him before in one of the previous 348 episodes of Tell the Damn Story. But here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Simmons. How are you today, Alex?
Hey Chris, how you doing? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm ready to find out some stuff today.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you introed it that way because yeah, we do talk about our challenges and the things we've gone through so that it'll be a little bit easier for you folks out there. And writing iconic characters comes with its own suitcase full of unique, sometimes tension building challenges, as well as, the obvious elation and thrills over being able to get in there and play with characters that you grew up enjoying and loving. So let's just sort of tackle it and I'll
Yeah.
share what I can share.
Well, this first one, it's really interesting that this first one we're going to deal with is the one of the first two actually are ones that we will not name the character's name
Hmm.
because of the nature of the writing assignment, but it'll be very clear. Publishers, don't come after us. Come on, think of it
Please.
as
I got a
free
buck
publicity.
95 here. Yeah.
You can only come after us if you want to say, we want you to name the characters. And here's the upcoming. But Alex and I both have experience with this first set of characters. I got to write one novel of this, my first professionally published novel. And how did I do it? I did it because Alex put me on his coattails. That's how I got to do it. So, first lesson, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to write iconic characters, know somebody. There you go.
Yeah. Know somebody
Alex,
who knows somebody.
tell us a little bit, talking around the NDA, but let's
Yeah,
talk about
okay,
this.
so we can talk about this. First off, in terms of getting to iconic characters, there are, different ways. If you're a freelance writer or just breaking in, obviously you're going to try and meet people. You're going to send out some sort of a resume. You're going to read, as Chris does, for instance, any postings of publishing houses, indie or whatever,
Mhm.
looking for writers to do this or looking for someone to come up with various projects. So way back in the day, I happened to be working as an assistant, office clerk, if you will, in this particular small publishing entity. And it was called a book packager. Now, that doesn't mean that they wrap books in brown paper or something like that. A book packager is the equivalent of a producer in television. Book packagers get writers together, and if it's necessary, they'll also pull together illustrators and editors and everything to write stories and put those stories through the mill, the editing, all that, and then hand those stories over to the publishing house that they were working for.
Yep.
So in this case, I was working with this particular company called Megabooks, and they were doing this kind of book packaging, again, pulling writers and artists and people together to create the material. They were doing it for a number of different publishers. I will not name the publisher, okay? But one of the projects that was going through their doors at that time involved two teenage boy detectives. And
Brothers, if I
um,
remember.
yeah, right. Just any two teenage boy detectives, and they had done a series of books already, several of them, and the series itself, these two characters had been around since the 30s, so these stories that were being done at that time were new. They were bringing these stories
Right.
into the present day, and subsequently they needed freelance writers, and this is called ghost writing, freelance
Hmm.
writers to come in and come up with plots and follow a certain what's called a character Bible or series Bible, follow certain do's and don'ts, but create fresh new stories for these iconic characters of at that point, my goodness, almost 50 years.
Yeah.
So I got to do several books on these teenage boys. I also got to plot, I know, something like 12 different
Mm.
stories for other writers to write. So that was exciting and fun.
Yeah. I only have a few memories of this. So what I was saying is that I only have a few memories of this writing project, which is the same brothers, frankly, you know. And
Keep going, keep going.
I could hardly believe it. But one of the things that I loved was, who was the editor on that book for us? Our late friend,
Oh, Bill McKay.
Bill McKay. Bill
Wonderful
McKay.
Bill McKay.
First, he sent me the Bible of the do's and don'ts, and it was so fascinating how many things they didn't even want to take a chance on that I hadn't even thought of. And then once they had it on, don't do this, yeah, I had a day or two of really having fun. Not writing them, just saying, well, we could do, no, we can't do that. And then the things that you could do, of course, that were kind of standard, and then the things they wanted to push towards. For example, mine had to do with they used some computers of the day. I think this was the 80s, maybe the early 90s.
Early
Uh,
90s, yeah.
early 90s. And so, those big, huge monochrome computers, that was the cutting edge that we added to this mystery. Bill was really great at politely pointing out where I could improve. And I owe Bill a lot. I owe you a ton, but I owe Bill a lot because he would show me in very polite ways where I was using 2 beats or 3 beats to express an action that 1 beat would cover. you
Hmm.
know so that tightened up my writing a lot. I learned that there were things that one brother would tend to say or tend to do that the other brother would be reluctant of. And once you had those things down,
Character personalities, yeah.
yeah, character personalities, then the scenes, again, it's that belief that I have that the more you know your characters, the more the characters will write the scenes. So that was a very great experience. But what were some of the challenges? He said, his voice breaking because he's finally going through puberty. What were some of the challenges of taking characters that arguably we both read as children? I mean, there's no
Hmm.
denying that.
Hmm.
But in the early 90s, we had to kind of be true to the tradition of the characters and then kind of fresh them up a little bit.
Well, I'm gonna lump two series, actually three series together that had the same similar challenges. All of them for this particular book packager that I was working for, and all of them had been established. All these characters in these three different series had been established back in the 30s, late 20s through the 30s. They were very popular then and there. One of them was a teenage girl detective. We already talked about the two boy
Right.
detectives, and the third was two twins, two sets of twins to the
Hmm.
same family, born to the same family, and they were kitty detectives.
Yes,
So
they were.
ultimately, you
Just bopping
have
along, solving
right,
crime.
yeah,
But
right. You have what was established for years, and this is again, this is dealing with iconic characters. There's something about the characters that the population over several decades kept coming back to, or the new generation got introduced to and enjoyed. There was
Yeah, yeah.
certain
You know what
similar,
it makes me think of?
excuse me.
Uh, you know what the late years later, you know what this experience made me think of, or what made it come back was when we were interviewing all those cozy mystery,
Ah, yes,
right?
right.
Because both these characters, these iconic characters, and cozy, you know, they were in danger, but like they didn't bleed, you know. These
Well,
guys were never going to get
again, you'd ask
shot.
what the challenges were. So, I mean, part of it was you're living in, at that time in the 90s, we're living in a different societal cube or
Yeah.
bubble at that point. Certain things had become socially acceptable on a societal level that had
Hmm.
not been the case back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. So the what is it, the sort of the gentle safe areas and aspects of the characters, the consistency, they all stayed the same age. You know, they
Right.
whatever the age was, that was it. But what was happening was, like, for instance, there was a digest version which was for markets 8 to 12, and then
Right.
there was what was called a YA, young adult version, which is 13 through, they would say, 18, right?
Right. But it was
So
mostly 16, but yeah.
so the teen detectives, the two boys or the girl, had both had books coming out in both categories.
Right.
The ones that were for the 8 to 12 were more homogenized. I don't mean that in a negative way, but the violence or action, better term, the action had to stay within a certain parameter. No one could actually get shot. No one's actually going to get stabbed. There's no blood in the scenes. There's no real gore or violence in the scenes. Someone could get caught and tied up and locked away in a room, or they could be hanging from some precarious position on a cliff or a
Right.
building, and be in danger, or a runaway vehicle. These things were possible, but no one died in the 8 to 12 version.
There wasn't so much of a shooting chase scene, but they might use a sled to get away from the bad guys.
Okay. So in the teen version, in the YA version, people could die again, not in a gory fashion.
Right.
Someone could die. There could be guns and things like that, but once again, there was a safe parameter,
Right.
and there was no sexual intimacy and things like that in either
No.
series. So for writing, again, the 90s, because we had the 60s, revolution, and we had the 70s, and we had peace, and we had protests, and all those things. So, in bringing these characters a little bit more into the times, there was still limits. You still had to sort of
Right.
homogenize certain aspects of it, and it was challenging at times, more so for the teen version, the older teen version, than for the 8 to 12,
Right. Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So you had to respect, and again, this is going to be a consistent ruling throughout this. You have to respect the source material. Doesn't
Right.
mean you have to love it, doesn't mean that you have to salute it, but you've got to understand you're being given the task or the privilege, depending on how you look at it, of taking established characters who have a fan base for a particular reason, and now you're going to create a new story to go with them and not radically change a lot of the world in which they exist.
Yeah. Well, in the original or the ones that we grew up with, you said there was a round of publishing before the hardcover blue ones that we will
Hmm.
remember. But there in the blue ones, which is what I remember, they would go to the library and do some research.
Yep.
And the big innovation, mine was kind of a computer-centered story, was that the research would be what could happen in there.
Hmm.
It wasn't like today's cyberspace, but one of them was better at code, if I remember correctly, and that kind of thing. So it was little adjustments. But yeah, okay, so we wound up dealing with the first two of 10 different iconic characters. So if there's no other things to
Well,
say
I would
about
say
the
again, just again, depending on the iconic characters, and since we're talking about this group, and I mentioned that it's there were three different series.
right,
you have to just also, be conscious of your audience,
Yep.
right? Not only in terms of what's allowed or not allowed within the series, but also the age group that you're writing for or writing
Right.
to,
Right.
right? What, adjusting your language to accommodate. And I don't mean talking down to anybody. That's
No.
not what I'm saying. But understanding that certain words that you might use if you're writing for a college age group or adult age group is not going to necessarily fly in a book for 8 to 12. So
Right.
you might have to find better phrasings, or I don't even say simpler phrasings, but again, phrasings that accommodate the readership that you're going for.
Right.
So follow the rules, create the world that is allowed, but yes, you can bring in new elements, and just be prepared for what the editor gives you as feedback to your work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was the experience where I realized that I welcome editorial feedback.
which is a great
Uh,
thing.
yeah, and just
If you can't handle that, you're in the wrong business.
I found that editorial feedback sparked my creativity. Oh, I know how to solve that. That kind of thing, which is
Oh,
really
well,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Okay,
great
next.
playwright who used to say that too.
Yes, Neil
Yeah,
Simon. That's
Neil
yeah.
Simon. Yeah. Oh, I
That's
can fix that.
yeah, I think I had gone through my Neil Simon era before I got this gig. So that might
Mm,
have been where I got
okay,
that
there
from.
you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that's the first two, really two and a half, because there was that other group included as well. But number three, we can tell the name of the
Oh
character.
yeah.
So this episode improves greatly right now, ladies and
Oh,
gents.
Raggy.
Yes, Alex Simmons often has written Scooby Doo
Scooby
and the
Doo.
Scooby
Yeah.
Gang
Yeah.
and the Mystery Bus.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. How'd you get that gig? And did Scooby have a Bible and all that? I can't wait to find out.
Well, the again, the funny thing is some series you are handed a Bible, and some series you are pulled into the office and you have a long talk with your editor. I was lucky enough to be working with the remarkable, talented, broad thinking Joan Hilty, who was an
Hmm.
editor at DC Comics. Because I did not get to write the cartoon show, the animated show, Scooby.
No.
I got to write the comic book series when it was being published by DC Comics. And Joan was great for a bunch of reasons, but one in particular, and again, this is something that you sometimes get to deal with if you're writing iconic characters, is the Scooby television series. And there were a number of Scooby animated series by the mid to late 90s. But the formula was pretty much the same. The gang shows up somewhere, there's a phony ghost, goblin, ghoul, whatever running around, there's chase scenes, mystery clues, and eventually the phony whatever is unmasked. And that was pretty much it. And then they ride off to wherever their next adventure is. Joan allowed for us in the comics to create a backstory for a lot of these characters, and whoa, to actually give them families, to actually give them relatives, and maybe pop in and visit these relatives and get some more backstory on the characters. That was the fun thing. So I was able to do a number of things with that were fun. But yes, there were a series of rules. Shaggy had to always be, thinking about food and running and hiding and eating. That's Shaggy's thing. Scooby being the faithful dog that he is also scared half the time, but also running and eating and sticking by Shaggy more than any of the other characters.
Yeah.
The
I always
character
felt like he was Shaggy's dog.
well, in a lot of ways, and as the series progressed again over the various incarnations, it pretty much was his.
Yeah.
Scooby was Shaggy's dog. Fred had his role in every mystery. Velma had hers. She was the smart genius one. Daphne was, 90% of the time. And this is, hey, this I didn't set it up this way, folks, but Daphne was the pretty girl, the cheerleader type, the maybe the girlfriend to Fred if Fred ever got it together.
Mm.
That was her part. She didn't really have a definitive anything else except occasionally she would spot a clue. So when I got a hold of the characters, once again, it's the 90s. The characters were created in the 60s.
Right.
So you got to advance this. You got to reflect society to some degree. So I had to find things in each character that I felt brought them forward for their moment in the spotlight and also made them more authentic for the time. So Daphne could figure out clues, could spot things, was thinking about it. She wasn't just being the pretty face. Yeah, Velma was the more scientist, research minded person, but she also had feelings. You know, Shaggy, Scooby, you want to bring your characters to life to accommodate the fan base that loves them, but also to take a look at society right now, like you had to do with the computers, you know, in the other series we were talking about, because yeah, when that series was created, there weren't computers, you know,
Right.
but now we're in the era when there are, and if you don't mention them, that's going to seem strange. So again, I was able to flex the personalities of these characters a little bit so that they resonated more with that time period. But
Mm.
again, you keep to the formula, and at that time, it was always someone in a mask. It was never real supernatural threats they were dealing with. But it was
Uh,
fun. It was fun because they would let me do things like I did one story where there's a teenage spy who is being chased by ghosts and goblins on like the Orient Express and the Alps. And what I was doing was an homage to James Bond, and he needed the Scooby Gang to come in and almost be like bodyguards and protectors to get him through this adventure.
all
So
right. So
characters.
two quick questions and quick answers, hopefully, that are audience oriented. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
How would you, or what would you advise an emerging writer to do if they wanted a shot at writing a character like the Scooby Doo characters for a comic book or uh little kids book like we would have remembered the Golden Key or
Hmm.
those golden
Gold Key. Yeah,
little
right.
that size. Not the comics, the
No, I know the hard book, the
yeah,
board
yeah.
books.
Some of
Yeah.
those I saw a lot of those, or little novelettes, and things like that. There, there are opportunities for a lot of characters, but how do you go in? What do you
Well,
think a young writer or an emerging older writer would need to bring to the table to pitch involvement in a character like that?
two to three things depending on who they're approaching. Good deal of the time, if you have no track record established out there already, so that someone could look you up and see, oh, this is what you've done, then you want to have something that says, this is what I can do. So you might want to have anything that you've written that you can send a sample of, or you might want to do a sample of the particular property that you want to write for. So if it was going to be Scooby Doo, you might do a few pages of a Scooby Doo story to show them how you would handle the characters and everything. Or you might come up with 3 or 4 plots and have those at the ready for discussion. The other thing I would say is, again, this is why it depends on who you're approaching. A lot of publishing houses or services or indies have online the criteria for approaching them. And you can
Hmm.
go online and look it up. You know, what does DC Comics expect if I want to pitch to them? And it'll tell you this and this and this and this is what you need to do. So that's fine. But I still say the fact that you might want to, and we're going to keep using Scooby for a moment, the fact that you might want to write a Scooby Doo, you think would be great. If you've never done it before, if you've never written anything like that, then you should do something, some sort of demo for yourself,
Hmm.
as well as having something ready to show.
Right,
Because maybe you think you can do it and you jump into it and you make some mistakes. And we all do that, you know. I'm not saying that you're bad or lousy or anything. No, but there are mistakes that you make. There are things you didn't know you shouldn't do or whatever. So maybe in doing this, you get a chance to work some of the kinks out.
right,
You get to find some of the, oh, yeah, no, this would work better if, so that you have something better to
right.
show.
It's because, Alex, not everybody has a good friend who will allow him to try and write an iconic character and then knock it down and have him rewrite it and knock it down and then eventually give him an assignment to do with that iconic character and then say, this is great. And then change all the dialogue because he still doesn't have the nuance. Not everybody has that kind of sacred
what I will say
relationship.
is not everybody earns that either,
I know, I definitely earned it, baby.
Well, what I'm going to say though, and this is again dealing with iconic characters. Sometimes people have, and I mean sometimes the aspiring or emerging writer has an attitude, a chip on their shoulder, or you're defensive because you're insecure, and so your defensiveness pops up there, and you say inappropriate things or you have an inappropriate attitude. It is not
Not me, of
personal.
course.
It is not personal 80%, 90% of the time. It's not
No, not at
personal.
all.
Okay? What it is this. You have to have, as much as possible, a realistic estimation of your skill set. You
Hmm.
have to also be prepared to, if you're going to put something out there for somebody to critique,
You
to
got to be ready
hear,
for that. Yeah.
yeah, to hear the critiques, not to shut it down immediately. And if they come back with, well, it's good, but okay, that doesn't mean get the hell out of my office.
Right.
Listen to what they're saying. Now, you have this wonderful opportunity here. You can hear what they're saying, take that home, digest it, look at the work, look at their notes, and go, oh, yeah, well, that would. Or you can go, well, that's a lot of horse pucky, you know.
Well, I
But the
mean,
thing is, you've got to be willing to hear feedback. You
right.
have to.
You can't lead with your ego,
Right,
you
right,
know?
and
And
it's
I want you to know that that blackjack story that, that I tell, which I just retold in a teasing way, is because it was one of the best lessons, writing lessons that I ever earned, because in reading the different dialogue, I was like, that's a subtle difference, but it does sound more like blackjack, and you have these are the things you learn. So your idea of letting them, encouraging them to write a kind of a practice script
Mhm.
or a practice story and then compare it to the source material.
Yeah,
Did I nail it? Is there, because the editors, the publishers, the creators of the characters, they have that sharp, knowledge of who would say what and exactly how it would be said. And that's part of your job, is to find
exactly,
that out. And
exactly.
that's not meant to intimidate. It's meant to encourage you to dive deeper,
Right.
you know?
So what we've covered so far is again, picking the characters. Yes, you might want to write something that you love and all that, but be prepared for feedback. You got to hear feedback. Do your homework with the
Yep.
characters for sure, right? And understand that the world that they were created within, that you're being given now, a lot of that has to stay the way it is. So part of your job is to find out what can I change or what can I add, what can I bring to the table.
All right.
Being open to hearing that.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, let's go to another one, which again, you were able to not only write numerous stories with this, but you were given an opportunity to put different characters in the spotlight of of the main cast,
Hmm.
and to bring a character who was like more like a background character into the foreground, and then to introduce a very, very famous character at the time, or from real life, into this set of characters. And of course, that is your experience in your many, many writing projects for Archie Comics.
Hmm.
I can add a little tiny bit because I did write and get paid for one 4-part Archie adventure, but there's an asterisk. Okay, but let's talk first. Alex, how did you first get involved with Archie in general?
Okay. As a freelance writer, I went to the Archie offices, and my whole effort was to be seen, to talk to an editor, and to try and get some freelance work, just writing some of the Archie stories. I had no major master plan beyond that. They let me do a couple of one shots, little short stories, 6 pages. Those they liked. So then they said, "Well, what else would you like to do?" And people got to learn never to ask me that because
But ladies and gentlemen, the lesson to take with you is that if they do,
yeah. So what
you
that led
respond with positivity,
right. And
it's
have ideas. This is the other thing. Have ideas. So what I
right.
I wound up coming up with was, if I remember correctly, it was a 5-part mini series adventure for Archie, where he and the gang traveled to 5 countries in 10 days. So I was taking the characters out of their regular world,
Right.
putting them into this globe hopping kind of adventure, school trip kind of thing, right?
Right.
But I added in some mystery and stuff to it, but I also use it as an opportunity to bring the characters forward. I will
Yeah.
set it up this way.
Okay.
Moose is constantly being played as sort of the big dumb jock kind of guy. And I was kind of tired of that stereotype. So Moose in my story, and I'm going to be very quick about this. Moose in my story is constantly seen with headphones on and what looks like a Walkman, a small little electronic, device. And so what the teachers are thinking half the time, we're on a tour, you're supposed to be listening to this and listen to this, and you're listening to music, and then what's wrong with you? And by, the third issue, they're pissed at him. And then we find out through his girlfriend, Midge, that no, he's not listening to music. He's recording the tours and the various remarks that are being said about the locations and the historical aspects and things like that, because it's difficult for him to process a lot of information. And
Mhm.
they have to do a paper on this trip. They have to write a big paper about what the trip was like, what they saw, what they learned.
Right.
And he knew it was going to be hard for him. He wouldn't
So he
necessarily
was taking the
remember
extra step.
everything.
Yeah.
So he was using this to record. And a Midge, who thought he was being a jerk until she finds this out, this is another reason I love you, blah, blah, blah. So their relationship is more about, I really care about you because I see something in you. And this is one of those moments where, oh, even I didn't see this. And it was taking Moose from that big dumb jock, always beating people up, persona, to, hey, I'm just trying to do the best I can with what I got.
Right.
Right. And you got to do a story with him that also dealt with.
Well, you had come to me saying that you had gotten permission to do some literary related Archie stories, and you want to know if I was interested. And you had talked to me about your development with Moose and all that, and I came back to you with a pitch for the Three Musketeers. We may have mentioned, you may have said, well, this piece of literature, that piece of literature, but I came back with the Three Musketeers. So the one story was that they were going to do a staged reading or stage performance of the Three Musketeers. But but the parallel story was that Moose was dyslexic, and unless he got his grades up, he wouldn't be able to be on the team, and it would ruin you know, scholarship possibilities and all that sort of stuff. And he wouldn't be allowed to be in this Musketeers thing. So they joined together, they banded together to help him learn
Hmm.
by learning dyslexia techniques. The little ruler that focuses only on the one line at a time, and all these different. I was a teacher at the time, so I went to the reading specialists and the learning specialists of the school and explained what I had. They got very thrilled, and they showed me everything that I wound up putting into Three Musketeers to help him. And we had cliffhangers and all that sort of stuff, and ticking clock and all those. And they wound up giving me a 4-part contract.
Hmm.
And I wrote it. They wanted a little adjustment so that this would happen by the third book, and then boom. So I did the rewrite and all that sort of stuff. And they were like, great. And they paid me, and they said,
And that
this
was
is
great. And we're going to
fantastic.
stop there. We're going to stop
And
there.
then there you go. So
Yeah,
I
there you go.
did an official Archie story, and I was really excited by it.
Yeah.
And I got paid by Archie for that story.
And again, what you just said, and this goes back to what this episode is about dealing with iconic characters, in being able to have conversations with the editors being receptive,
Right.
the editors and the owner being receptive to that dialogue. We're able to share our ideas. We're able to hear what they want or need, right? And then make the adjustments so that the bottom line is the story wins. And you were
Yes.
able to bring from and pull from your experience, not only as a teacher, but then connect with other teachers with a
Yeah.
specific skill set to bring that in so that these iconic characters could actually possibly reflect more of the audience out there,
Right. Right.
and
And
that's key.
and it was one of the spoken subtext was a class or a program that we had developed together. I had read in American Teacher. It was a whole cover story about how these reading specialists were using comic books as the bridge, because for people who had tough time reading and comprehending, it had been discovered through studies that one of the big problems was they couldn't visualize.
Hmm.
Comic books teach you how to visualize what's going on with, with the action. So there would be a bridge thing that would be very successful. I want to talk about two specific projects that you did for Archie. And I have
Okay.
so one was taking a background character, and that character became the title character. He had been around for a long time. Now, did you pitch it or did they ask you, or how did this happen, and who was this character and what was your experience?
Okay. So,
Then I
okay.
have one other question about
Okay. So
another character.
you're talking about Chuck Clayton. Chuck
Chuck Clayton.
Clayton is the teenage boy. He is the son of Coach Clayton. Coach Clayton would pop up every once in a blue moon or a brown moon in an Archie story. Yes, I said that. And I believe there might have even been a couple of times when his wife was shown. I don't really remember.
Right.
But the Archie format at the time was there was a lot of little short stories, like little 6-page stories, 8-page stories, or something like that, and different writers were working on them. So I guess in a way, writers bring to the table who they are, where they are, what they see, and so black characters or characters of color weren't popping up very often. But here was Chuck Clayton, who is the black teen who could step forward since the 1970s, who occasionally would step forward in an Archie comic. Chuck loved to draw. He wanted to be a cartoonist or a comic book artist when he grew up, right? That was his thing. So, as I said, the character had been around since the 70s, so I didn't create him. But
Right.
again, every now and then you would see him in a show, in an episode. Or, I'm sorry, let's try it one more time.
Issue.
In an
Issue.
issue. There we go. And so what happened was Mike Pellerito, who was the one of the major editors at Archie at the time, he's moved
Very
up.
nice guy.
He's moved up. He's a great guy, consistently a great guy. Mike came to me and he said, "Look, we want to do something with Chuck, right? And he likes to draw comics." And I'm thinking, "Yeah, yeah." And he says, "And you, Alex, you teach workshops to kids about how to create comics." And I went, "Yeah, yeah, I do, right?" And he says, "Do you think you could come up with a story where Chuck does the same thing?" And I went, just like in the boardroom, I went, "A story? Are you kidding? I got a bunch of ideas in my head." And he went, "Okay, pitch them." And so it turns out that I came up with a 4-issue miniseries of Chuck Clayton doing just that. But it wasn't like the same situation each issue.
Right.
He worked with a teacher who was teaching a history class, and she wanted to add comics to that. Another time, he was working with kids in an after-school program, and Chuck was teaching his comics workshop there. So, and there was another one where there was another kid who had been caught defacing what appeared to be defacing a wall of a person's outside a person's store, and Chuck got involved in that. So there were 4 different situations, but Chuck as the comic book guy and the guy who was working with kids and showing them how illustration and art and everything, creativity could be a powerful thing for you. That was what I did, and it was most of them were based on my experiences teaching these workshops to kids and working with teachers and all that other stuff. So I just pulled from my experience to bring that around. And
So that
one of the things that I got to do with that was I got to show Chuck at home with his mother and father, his family. So we got some home life thing. Got to show his girlfriend and his relationship with her a little bit. And then towards the very last issue, Chuck is helping his grandmother. So I got to give him a grandmother, right? And she had to get some stuff out of the garage and just move stuff. And in it, he comes across a family album. And in going through it with his grandmother, he sees that there was this relative of his from 3 generations back who was an explorer and sort of went around the globe doing stuff. And the grandmother's going, "Oh, I'll have to tell you about him sometime." And that's where I left that off. So that was my
What
little wink, wink, nod, nod to a
to
blackjack
blackjack?
kind of
That's
character. Yeah,
great. That's great.
yeah.
Now, this is a great example. If we're talking about things we want you to take away, the experience you bring to the table, it's not necessarily going to be something like, oh, I got to keep this in my CV or my resume because this will lead to that. You just honestly put your experience down. Here, Mike said, you do this, and the experiences you have actually sometimes open up
Hmm.
opportunity, and just be ready to walk through. Now, from all of that, and my memory is not always as linear and chronological, so if so, just correct me. But you were also asked to bring what we would call now a historical figure, contemporary historical figure, into Archie. Wasn't that you?
Oh,
Oh,
oh, oh,
oh,
yes, yes,
oh,
yes.
oh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess
Irish
the
guy,
best way to
right?
segue into that is to say that sometimes, comic books, like everything else, reflect life as it is at the moment. And so at the time, we had a particularly visually unique president. We had Barack Obama in the office.
Irish guy, Obama.
Yeah, really,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So,
Obama, right. And how, not to go into all the details, but the campaign to win that office, one of the people he had to compete against, I'm trying to be very PC here,
right.
was a politician from Alaska by the name of Sarah Palin.
Hmm.
And it had been very volatile campaign. If you think the present campaign was volatile, this one was really this president was intense. But that
This
one,
was the blueprint.
yeah, yeah, that one had its moments too. And
Right,
so
right.
Obama had won, and the people at Archie had said, we want to do an issue with President Obama in it. Do you think you could come up with a story? I love when they ask me that, because I'm going, yeah, I think I can come up with a story that would
How
involve
many you
Obama.
want?
But they also wanted Sarah Palin in the story. And this is after he's already won the election and everything. So I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? So again, I looked at their past challenges. And one of them was environmental. How Sarah saw the environment and how Obama saw the environment were very, very different. And so I thought, oh, this would be kind of fun, although it would be poking the bear a bit. But I pitched it and they went, oh, no, 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 too political. No, no. I said, okay. And I went back to the drawing board and I came up with another plot and I presented it and they went, oh yeah, that one's fine. That one seems tame. So the bottom line is the focus is that Archie and Reggie are vying for class president. They're on the campaign. They're doing their campaigning thing, and Archie is just losing. You know, at the rallies and things, Reggie is just on. He's just on point. He's a showman. He's saying all the right things, and Archie is fumbling. He's tripping. He's not coming across as a real leader. And Veronica is his manager, and she's ticked off, right? She's saying, no, they don't have any confidence in you. We got to fix that. So then she realized, and this is funny because again, when we look at life, who you know, who you're connected to, can sometimes be used for you or against you.
Right,
So anybody knows the series, Veronica's father is filthy rich. He
right.
has a lot of connections. So at one point in a completely different story, he had been at a rally or an event or something, and President Obama had been there, and Veronica had had a chance to meet him, yada, yada, yada. So in my story, Veronica goes, ooh, Obama's going to be at this event coming up. She rushes Archie to a store. She outfits him in this great suit. They jump on the jet, private jet, fly to this event, and she introduces Archie to President Obama, and they're shaking hands. And Archie's like, "Oh wow, this is really," and she sneaks a photograph of it
Right.
and leaks it to the internet so that the shot shows Obama shaking hands with Archie. And what is that shot meant to do? It's meant to create the illusion that Obama supports
Sports
Archie.
Archie, right.
Right. Well, Reggie and his campaign manager lose their minds, and then the campaign manager realizes Sarah Palin is doing a book signing in a town nearby, and they run and do the same thing. And they throw that on the web. And again, it has a similar effect. And then everybody, this is how life works. The internet, social media plays it up. So then the newspapers pick up on that.
Right.
They blow it up. And at the end of it was a two-part story. At the end of part one, limousines and Secret Service and everything are converging on the
On Riverdale High.
Riverdale High, and they want to see Archie Andrews now.
Dun dun dun.
Right. And Obama and Palin are coming out of the limo, right?
There you go.
And I wrote the story, and again, the kids run, they try and hide. Eventually, they get found. They have to have a meeting with Obama. Reggie has a meeting with Palin. They talk all this out. There's a moral in the story and all that, and happy ending.
There you
A
go.
friend of mine who, and again, they bought the story. Archie loved the story.
Right.
It was drawn, printed. Dan Parent did the artwork. It was great. A friend of mine who is a journalist in England was traveling to Australia, picked up the book, read it, and wrote back to me. And he says, "This is a great story. It's all about media manipulation, isn't it?" And I went, "Yep."
Yeah, sure.
I couldn't get in the environmental thing, but I
Right.
got in that, right?
There you go.
So again, iconic characters, you can use them to say something, but again, you have to find a way to do that that doesn't completely rip their world apart,
Right.
doesn't give your client a reason to go, "Oh, hell no."
Right.
You want everybody to be happy if that's possible. You want to walk away feeling good and have a check in your hand. You want your publishers to say, "Oh, that was another good story, and look, we're getting great results from it." Everybody's happy. That means there could be more work down the road for you, as opposed
All
to
right.
pissing everybody off and nobody knows your name.
There you go. Now, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock. I know we're kind of running long. So I would like to suggest a lightning round.
Oh, sure,
I will
absolutely.
name a character that you did, and you tell me biggest challenge or piece of advice you would give. Biggest challenge for you. Now, let's say piece of advice you would give to an emerging writer who wants to write this character. Okay?
Okay, I'll try. I'll
All right.
try.
So here we go. What advice would you give to somebody who wrote characters who wants to write characters that you have written? For example, Batman.
Ooh, Batman. That's a tough one. It depends again on when you're jumping into the ring. But the short answer would be, like I said before, do some practice runs and make sure that you have a handle on the character as he or they are being presented in the current series or in the
Right.
current time period that you're dealing with.
Because he has been written very differently
Right.
over the decades.
Oh,
Right.
over the decades, and also certain series.
Yeah.
Certain series he's dealt with one way, other series, and they can be running concurrently.
So
So
that lesson is do your homework.
do your homework, know the series, know how they're using the character, and then see what you can come up with that would complement that, but rings true to you.
There you go. Superman.
Superman. Again, which version? Because I've written Superman, and the story that I told dealt with some background story that they'd already done with the character, and I wanted to add to that. So that's one approach. You can pick up on a storyline that they've already done. Maybe you feel they didn't milk it as much
Right.
as they could have, or you come up with, ooh, they did mention this, and this would be really cool. So you can pitch that new view or that new angle, that subplot that you feel could be developed into something fantastic. Or you can, go in there and pretty much again, if you're new to the game, go in there with some material that shows what you can do, pitch that, see where it goes from that. And of course, since we're talking Superman, we're talking DC, Marvel, Warner Brothers, those sort of upper echelon publishing houses and producers, go to their website and check what is their criteria for
Right.
submission. How do they
And
want to see it?
and it might behoove you to look at some lesser characters to pitch as well, because the big three, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, they're going to be harder to break into than, say, a Dr. Midnight fill-in story, a backup story. So you might have that approach as well.
Well, that is a great point too, because remember, however great you may feel you are, they don't know you.
Right.
They don't know your work. They don't. You may not have an established reputation at that point, so they've got to learn. So they got to tread lightly. If they see
Right.
something in your writing and go, well, I kind of like the way they handle this, but I'm not sure. Very much what Chris is saying. They may give you a B or C level character.
Right.
Do something with this first. Let me see what you do. And don't,
Now,
oh, no, no, I want to do Batman. I want to do
right,
something. No, no.
right. Don't,
Take that mid
because
range or lower level character and blow their minds.
that's about not making it easier for them to say no.
Yeah.
Right. You come
Right.
in with that kind of attitude. All right. Now, this next one, kind of a unique situation. This is a really well-known legendary character who has been in pulp novels, short serials, full-blown movies, television shows, comic books, comic strips, and that's where Alex Simmons steps in because you did a really unique and I love it. I wish they would just put it out as as its own thing. But you did a team up with your character Blackjack and this legendary character Tarzan.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe what are the unique challenges of a comic strip that emerging writers might want to think about?
Well, yeah,
One, there's little market for them these days,
yeah,
but
yeah. I was gonna say you got that, but that doesn't mean that means that in terms of syndicating comics in the newspapers and that sort of thing, maybe there's a little bit of a shrinking market, but it doesn't mean that you can't do comic strip storylines online,
right.
with your own characters, your own series. So that's
Mhm.
something else, and there are a number of those out there. But okay, so the Tarzan strip was another great. I mentioned Mike Pellerito being a great editor, another great, and Joan Hilty, another great editor I had a chance of working with. This particular editor I'm about to mention, literally, it's like I've been lucky and blessed to have worked with some phenomenal people. This was, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to edit this out now. There we go. Okay, this editor is Amy Lago. And Amy Lago was working for United Feature Syndication at the time. She knew my work on Blackjack and stuff. We'd seen each other at a couple of conventions in San Diego and New York and all that. And she offered me an opportunity to take over the Tarzan comic strip, writing the comic strip.
Mhm.
And she actually asked if there was an artist I wanted to work with, and I mentioned Eric Battle. So we had an opportunity to meet with her. She liked our work, she liked Eric's work, and we got hired to do that. And the first comic strip that I did with Eric was it was Tarzan and six people who were there in the jungle doing a TV show, and this was my homage to Survivor.
Okay.
But it was Survivor in the jungle, and these people were in a lot of trouble, and Tarzan wound up getting involved. So that was our segue in. That was almost like our test run with the strip, and we did like a 21-week run on that particular story. And while that was running, she then said to us, can we do a crossover with Blackjack and Tarzan? And I went, whoa, what? And yeah, you're elated on one level, and then you're going, wait a minute, but that's my character. I own that, and this Tarzan. And so she's, no, 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 no. The Tarzan people don't want to own your character, and you will not own Tarzan. That's for darn sure, right? But you can do a crossover. Would you be amenable to that? I'm already writing it. We haven't
Right.
left, haven't left the table. So Eric and I got to do this wonderful crossover, and there were some elements to deal with in terms of time shift because Blackjack takes place in the 1930s. Tarzan, the strip, he was in present day. So there was how do we deal with time travel or juxtaposition of some sort of time warp or whatever. And so I came up with an angle. It ran it by the editor. She liked it. Eric and I got to do that. And again, it was another 21-week
Mhm.
storyline, which I really enjoyed, and also was able to bring in the elements of pollution and poisoning and
Right.
also war crimes. So I was
Okay.
able to sort of pull all
But
those things into that one storyline.
let's talk to the audience about the unique packaging of comic strips, right?
Hmm.
Except for Sunday, you're going to have two or three panels per day, right? Sometimes four, but boom, 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 right?
Hmm.
And it has to kind of engage on that level, but also help build this. What is the challenges, or what is the advice you can give on, okay, if you get a chance to do a comic strip,
Well,
here's how you
like,
break your story down into, fun size, like a little Snickers, fun
yeah.
size bites.
So for one, unless you're doing like a special shot close up or something where you need the majority of the panels as this one shot, you're going to give yourself 3 to 4 panels straight across, reading left to right. And so my rule of thumb is thinking panel one and panel four. You have to know what's that opening shot and what does it have to establish and what's your cliffhanger shot at the
Oh,
end.
okay.
You got to leave
Excellent.
them in panel four wanting to know, oh, what happens next?
So
You've
they go
always got
back.
to do that.
There
So
you
then
go.
you have the 2 panels in between to help carry this across, whether
Right.
it's a transition or just different angles of a conversation or action that's taking place. You've got these 2 panels in the middle to deal with it. But you
Excellent.
got to know what happens at the opening and what's going to happen at the closing panels.
Now we're
So,
going to jump in. We're going to do 8 and 9 together.
okay.
Okay. Because both of them, a similar situation where there is an opportunity to do, for both of these characters, stories as part of kind of a tribute book, or kind of a book to honor the character or some aspect of the character. So one was Black Panther and Tales of Wakanda, and the other one was Captain America in the very upcoming, actually out right now, was it Captain America, the
Shield of
Shield
Sam
of
Wilson.
Sam Wilson. That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, it
So
is. I love
let's
the
talk
colors.
about the challenges of getting this opportunity where you have certain things you're trying to represent, or you're trying to, you kind of have to match a theme. So what are you talking about here, bro?
Oh, again, iconic characters come with a lot of responsibility, a lot of do's and don'ts, and sometimes a lot of baggage. You know, people will love the way some people handle the characters over how other people handle the
Right.
characters. So the benefit of doing a short story in a collection, which is what both of these situations were. I did a short story in the Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, and I have a short story in Captain America Shield of Sam Wilson. The benefit of doing a short story, it's self-contained. I don't have to blend in with the other people. It's an episode unto itself.
Right.
And that's fun. And it's the job of Jesse Holland, who's the editor and sort of the foreman on this
Right.
project,
Which
to
we've
make
had on this
sure
show. He's
that
a great guy.
oh yeah, he is. To make sure that the collection of stories complement the book, so that
Right.
when people are reading it, they're enjoying it. They're going from one to the other, and they sort of line up in some way that feels, yes, I just got this rich banquet, this wonderful meal here, and everything worked. So for me, it was what angle did I want to show of Sam Wilson that maybe none of the other writers were going to tackle in particular. And at the same time, I wanted to have an adventure or an action adventure aspects of it. So what I thought about was the fact that, and this may have something to do with again where my head is, Sam's parents, Sam Wilson's parents, both died unfortunately way too soon in their lives. His
Hmm.
father was killed, was shot down in the street, and his mother was a year later is attacked and also dies. And so the whole thing there was, how did his life with his family impact on him? He was an adult when they died, so it wasn't
Right.
like Bruce Wayne sort of thing. But how did that affect him? How did growing up with a father who was a minister, how did that impact on him? And then here he is in this dangerous situation, which is ongoing at this point. How's he going to deal with that? And then on top of that, I threw in an ethical question, two actual. One of them deals with the identity of one of the villains that he's up against, which challenges something about Sam, or at least the villain puts it in a way that it seems to be a challenge for Sam. And the other then too is, what are you really willing to fight for? And is it more important than the lives of those that you love?
Interesting.
And so
And
I wanted to put all of those questions and those elements into the same story and do it in a really short period of time, because it is a short story. It's not a
mm,
novel in and of itself. It's one of 11 or 12 stories in the book.
But here's a situation where you have an established character. You have a character that has evolved from the Falcon to Captain America. And
Mhm.
then this book is definitely time to celebrate his Captain America-ness
Yeah,
just in time for on February 14th,
the
Captain
movie.
America Brave New World is coming out, which was going to be the first one with Sam in the lead as Captain America. So I can understand the marketing of it. I think the lesson you're giving people who are listening is that, you know, pay attention to the do's and don'ts. You are very familiar with the character and the area, and then you look and say, what of his background, what of his character is fertile material to develop further, to create nuance for, and in there, can I express myself? And that's where those ethical questions came in, which is really, I think it's a slam dunk for someone like Sam, because Sam has always been a moral character, much more than a super powered character,
Hmm.
and that's a brilliant, wonderful thing. Last one we have is tied into an upcoming project that we are working on together. A play that was in a great collection called, was it Black Thunder?
Hmm.
Right? And this play has been staged and, reviewed and all that sort of stuff. But, in discussing it with you recently, we were like, it really should have an opportunity to stand on its own. And that's what we're going to do and give it kind of a solo book for people to grab and say, oh, yeah, exciting. And it's Sherlock Holmes.
Yes,
And
it is.
I have two questions for you to wrap up this episode. And Sherlock, we know, most of us are readers, and we know from the classic stories that are collected. And there's if you haven't read the complete Sherlock Holmes volumes 1 and 2, well, go treat yourself. But then also movies, and also he's been reincarnated, Benedict Cumberbatch, Robert Downey Jr., all these different versions and all that
Hmm.
sort of stuff. But you
Elementary.
have a very traditional Sherlock in Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello. But he is in a very traditional, recognizable Sherlock Holmesian way. He is dealing with material that he is not known for dealing with, which is racism.
Hmm.
All right, so how do you handle a period piece with a beloved character who is, I mean, almost etched in stone, but introduce thematic storyline that will resonate with modern readers as well? Great challenge for any writer. How did Alex Simmons handle it?
Well, first, and I'll try and be as concise as I can. First and
Because we're in
foremost,
hour 3 by now, but
yeah, okay, right. I grew up reading Sherlock Holmes. I love the character. I love mysteries in general, but I always loved Sherlock Holmes and had a great time with him. And there's a story called The Yellow Face, which is a short story that Conan Doyle wrote. And spoiler alert, folks, here. So if you don't want to know how this story ends, listen until I go. And so in the end, and then just turn off the sound. But okay, so Holmes is asked to come out to the countryside there. There's a wealthy man who's married to a young wife. And he loves her madly, and she loves him madly. But some suspicious things have been happening between her and some people who moved into the house just down the road from them. And he's suspecting that it's another man, and that maybe somehow she's involved with this guy or whatever, and it builds and builds and builds, and Holmes gets in on the case. And he says one thing in particular: when he went to the house, the husband goes to the house to maybe confront this other person, and he sees on the second floor window someone looking out at him with this, what he could only describe as this strange yellow face. And then suddenly the curtains were drawn. And so that's the big mystery. Who's there and what's this? Is it jaundice? Is the man sick or whatever? Blah 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 blah. And Holmes eventually does his thing, gets his clues and everything, and figures out what's going on. And it turns out that the woman had been married before in the United States. She had married a man that she loved very, very much, and who, because of that love, they were willing to be together, knowing that the community around them would shun them because he was black.
Hmm.
but she loved him and they were happy. But then he dies, and she does have a child by him, and she's raising the child as best she can. And at a certain point, she needs to get away. So she leaves the child with, I believe it's a maid or whatever, comes to England just to sort of revitalize herself and everything like meets this other guy. Just, over a year or so had passed. Meets this other guy, falls in love with him, marries him, but she's afraid to tell him about the child. But she can't not see the child. So she pays for the maid and the child to come and live in that house. And she's been sneaking off to go and visit them. And so Holmes reveals that the child is a mix or black, however you want to look at that. And she said, I was afraid to tell you because I was afraid you'd leave, you'd leave me and that would be, but I understand. And if you want to go, that's fine. My child and I will be.
Did she marry Sherlock?
No, 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 this other guy.
Oh,
This other guy.
okay. I just want to be clear.
Right. So the guy says to her, you were afraid to tell me about this because you thought I would shun you and your child. He says, you don't know me. And he takes them both and he goes home with them.
Okay.
That's how the story ends. So I
Oh,
already had,
spoiler.
yes, sorry, forgot that. So
Decades old story.
too bad. So I already knew from that story, I had some sense of Conan Doyle's thinking about this character.
Okay.
Holmes doesn't care about color. At least in this story, it's not important. It wasn't a factor. And if you think about Holmes, he's analytical. He's seldom emotional, and most of the time, bigotry, hatred, that kind of narrow-minded
emotional.
stupidity is emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to him, the kid is who the kid is. Here it is, and I mean, whatever you're going to do. So, and even it, are you going to be an honorable man and take your wife and her child into your home? He would think in those levels, but not about, oh, well, I can see it. So it's a dark kid, and you don't want that, right? So when I knew that, and I could look back at the actual, canon of the character and see, oh, well, he dealt with this that way then. My idea for a real human being named Ira Aldridge, who lived in the United States until he was in his early 20s, and then went to Europe, became this acting success, this star in the continent, and traveled and did Shakespearean plays and everything, married and died there in Europe. The things that happened to his family after this were very suspicious. I went, ooh, what a great way to introduce Ira Aldridge to a larger population and at the same time have a great Holmes mystery. And I began to think of how to weave that mystery together based on certain things that actually happened to Ira's family and to him, and of course the lore, legend, canon of Sherlock Holmes.
Hmm.
So I would say that again, and this is probably a good way to round this off. If you've listened to this entire episode, the ramblings of these two old dudes here, you've heard that I've done certain things with Obama, with Ira Aldridge, with Tarzan, I've always managed to put something into the stories that speaks to something I feel or believe in or stand for.
Right.
Right. And that's part of what I bring to the table. Whether they love it or not is always the question, but that's what I do. And I think again, in dealing with iconic characters, yes, respect the source material. Yes, do your homework, do the research. If you've never written anything like this before, write some practice material to give yourself a chance to sort of work out the muscles and the kinks in it so you have some sense of what it's like. But ultimately, it is always going to be about, and what do you bring to the table?
Right.
What's going to make what you do as good, better, different than the 47 other writers and artists who've gone before you? Or in my case, in some situations, the 40 years of writing of these characters that have gone before me. And you can't be fearful of that. You have to embrace that and go, yeah, well, what would I like to do? What could I do? And look for those things so that you can have something to share when you're given that opportunity to step through that door.
Boom. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for going through. It was a lot. And hopefully,
we may have to divide this into 2 episodes.
Yeah, but it was cool. And if you liked it, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and come back and see us again.
And we have something coming up for you in episode 350.
350. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was so much to talk about regarding.
We actually have Sarah Palin and Obama coming to. No, wait, that's not that's not what's happening. No,
No, that's not what's happening.
I was misinformed. I'm sorry.
Oh God, no. But we do have yes, senility setting in. We do have some wonderful stuff lined up for you, and we'll give you a peek into that in our promotional material between now and episode 350. So, thank you, Chris, as always.
Peace, everybody. Live long and prosper.
Yes, and all that good stuff. And let us know what you think of the episode.
Please.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Take care.